And there's the stream. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're 10 minutes before starting the live event. If you are watching this live, you can just hang out for 10 minutes. If you're not watching this live, you could still hang out for 10 minutes, or you can, fast forward 10 minutes. We're watching the birds this morning in the backyard at birdfeeder.live. So let's put in the chat room that we're now live. Security plus study group is here. Enter. And here. And there you go. Oh, very nice day outside. What is it? 68 degrees Fahrenheit. 20 degrees Celsius. Very nice. And is there a squirrel? There's a squirrel. You can't see him because of my head. There is a squirrel right here in the other bird feeder. That's not what I was shooting for. I need to find my pinpoint though. So I can highlight him. Here we go. So right here, that's a squirrel who's in the other bird feeder, who shouldn't be there, but I don't have a baffle on that bird feeder, and quite honestly, the Mrs. Professor Messer kind of likes to have the squirrels fed. So he can't get into this one. You can kind of see the baffle at the bottom. It's kind of hard to see behind my head there. There's a baffle down here at the bottom. They can't get up, and it's far enough away from these trees back here. Doesn't look like it, but it is, that they cannot jump onto it. So I've effectively de-squirreled this guy. But this fella over here, he's stone cold munching. He is absolutely having a good time with that. So nice out there. Well, it's also nice in here. We got a Security Plus study group coming up. We've got, how many minutes? 7.5 or so. And we'll do the Security Plus study group. It's the last study group of the month. What's the calendar like the rest of the month? Do I get a week off this time? It's October. So next month we're off. It's my bye week. And then we start up again in November. First 3 weeks in November. And November has 5 Wednesdays, which means I get 2 weeks off. And then in December, I'll be skipping. I guess I think we're going to skip the third. Security Plus will be a week later. No skipping in December. So I'm saving up my skippings to be all in November. 2 weeks off. What am I going to do with 2 weeks off? Well, I know what I'm going to do with 2 weeks off. It's not 2 weeks off. It's not. Oh no, the bird's giving the squirrel the bird eye. Went down here. That squirrel's loving it. No zoom on this camera. No PTZ on this cam. Didn't have the budget. I am watching the chat room, though. If you're just getting here, professormesser.com/live, because you'll notice there is no chat over on the YouTube side. But professormesser.com/live will take you to the live chat room, which I'm looking at right here. It's on my screen. I look at it all the time, constantly. I'm sick of it. Emails will go out in a minute. And then some people, a lot of you already joined, though. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Oh, there's a bee. All right. What else do we need to do? I already updated the website with the live link. I already got recordings going. You see the Cylons going down here, recording on the tube of view. I've got Keynote ready to go. Does it see my Keynote? Yeah, I went through and was updating. I know I don't have to update access points for crack, but I was updating access points, routers that I've got strewn about here and there, because it just seemed like a good time to do it, and broke the one I had in here. I didn't break it, but I plugged in a cable that I should not have plugged in, which caused the operating system of the access point of the router to decide that there was an IP address conflict and it completely reset all the IP addressing on the device, which that doesn't help me. So I had to get out, I had to plug in directly because I didn't know what IP address it was using, figured it out based on ARPs. I did packet captures, grabbed the ARPs coming from the device, figured out the IP address, connected to the device, and changed the IP address scheme. And then everything was fine. And here we are. See how easy that was? All right, did our tweets go out? Let's check the tweeter. Hi, tweeter. Yep, tweets went out. Emails should have gone out. It's always a challenge. We never quite sure. We need to turn Pinpoint on here too. Pinpoint's this little app I run on these, so you see the yellow going around the screen when I'm trying to point things out. So that's what that's about. San Diego. Hello. Welcome. Early morning. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome. In Utah in the house. So nice right now in the Utah. I was just looking around at temperatures. This is our first day of nice weather. Right now, you can see it's 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been very nice today. This is our first day of this. It was in the 80s yesterday. And it'll go up again, not quite as bad, but maybe we get a little bit of autumn, a little bit of fall coming in here. Oh, and the Canadians are in the house. Well, Mrs. Professor Messer will be glad to hear that. She is, as I've mentioned before, she is 100% Canadian blood and an American citizen and not a Canadian citizen. Kind of weird how that worked out, but there it is. There's an interesting story there. I'm sure that someday we'll get to that. Right now, we'll just ponder it. Figure out the details. A lot of activity at the bird feeder today. It's nice out. The birds are everywhere. I filled it up. Of course, this is on 24/7 at birdfeeder.live. If you ever want to just take a peek into my backyard, sometimes you'll hear me yelling at things or walking around doing all kinds of cleanups and watch me weed. That's really a lot of fun. Watch me clean up. I got to put down more pine straw. It's about time of the year. I do get hummingbirds in my backyard. I have a hummingbird feeder. It's off camera. We get plenty of those. Absolutely. I've not seen a charm of them. I just see every once in a while, I'll see one or two come through. A pack of hummingbirds is a charm. Isn't that adorable? And there's your little trivia for today. Now you know. How are we doing on time? We got 2 minutes, everyone. 2 minutes. I think this is ready to go. Can we? Yeah, that works. That works just fine. Is this the right presentation? That's a different question, isn't it? What are we doing here? I lost part of my cable under the floor. There we go. Now we're in good shape. Let's do a camera check. Here's a camera. Camera 1. Hi, camera 1. Is it the right height? I think it is. Camera 2. Camera 3. Camera 4. That will eventually show the things. I think we're in good shape there. All right. Well, Florida's a big place. We don't know what freezing is. I used to live in South Florida, where you really never got cold weather. But here in North Florida, we can get into the teens. Doesn't commonly snow, though, here. We don't get a lot of snow in North Florida. I grew up in North Florida, and it would snow once every couple of years, every 3 years, every 4 years. That kind of thing. Okay, that's ready to go. Click, click, click. All right, it's time to say goodbye to the birds. The flowing water. Oh, it's so quiet now. What happened? Go to professormesser.com/QA. Unless you're on a mobile device, the Socrative code is Professor Messer. It's all on the page professormesser.com/live. All of those things are written right there. So you can find them easily and look at the spelling and do all those things. All right, it's time. Let's do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2017 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. I'm your host, James Messer, and through this next hour, I'm going to take you through all of the Q&A, interactive Q&A. You get to participate if you're watching this live, and our Security Plus questions and answers. I got plenty of questions for you. These are all brand new questions I write every month. I do one of these every month. If you're ever wondering when the next one of these events is going to be, you can go to professormesser.com/calendar, and the calendar will be there. You'll know all about it. But we've got plenty to go through with questions today. So I've got a lot of things set aside. And of course, after this first hour, we open up the phone lines. So you could, of course, call in and ask questions. I'm also watching for questions as we go on professormesser.com/live. There is a chat right on the page, and I'm looking at that right now. I'm able to do these study groups thanks to your support. Wouldn't be able to do them without you. Not only your participation, but your ongoing support throughout the month. Many of you know that all of my Security Plus videos, the entire course, is available to watch absolutely free online. There's no registration. There's no limits. It's not a crippleware version. You get every second of every video. Some of you like to have an offline version. There's a version of that available for sale. You can find that at professormesser.com/getsecplus. That comes with not only the videos, but it comes with the audio MP3 versions of this, and also comes with my course notes. We'll talk more about the course notes in a bit. There's always something going on here. We've got a lot happening here with professormesser.com/Twitter and /YouTube. You type in professormesser.com/ the name of a third-party website of social media, /Instagram, /Twitter, /YouTube. It will take you there. Makes it easy. So very, very easy to find me wherever I happen to be. Also, don't forget about the voucher discounts. Don't pay full price when you're ready to take your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certifications. You can instead go to professormesser.com/vouchers. There's a 10% discount right there. Costs you nothing to have it. Something you might be able to use if you're planning to take your exam sometime soon. I have some free quiz questions on my website at professormesser.com/popquiz, all one word. And there's plenty of Security Plus questions. I archived the questions from the study group. So there's a lot of good things in there that might help you along those lines. Don't forget also, a lot of you will come back to my website, watch the video replay. Some of you prefer an audio version of this, but you don't get to see this mug whenever you're listening to the audio version. I'm very sorry. But if that's your prerogative, of course. You can find these podcasts at professormesser.com/podcasts. There's links there that you can point your podcast catching, reading, listening to app straight to it, and then it automatically downloads onto your device whenever it's available. I try to get them out usually the day of or the day after the study groups. Hopefully that's the way it will work out this time as well. There's a lot of Q&A we're going to do today. I mentioned that this is interactive. You get to participate. I ask questions and you answer them in real time. And we get to see everything going on with these pieces. You can find out all about it. There is the third-party site that we use, is Socrative. And the way that you would get to Socrative is go to professormesser.com/QA. And that will take you right to the room. There'll be a question waiting for you if you're watching this live. Now, if you're not watching this live, that link will not work. professormesser.com/QA will just sit there and nothing will be happening. But it's okay. You can still follow along with the video or the audio replay. That's not a big deal at all. If you're using an app, because there is a Socrative student app that you can use, the student app has one that will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. You put those in there and it will take you to a room, and there'll be a question waiting for you, a decidedly non-technical question to start this off, just to see if it's working. The decidedly technical, non-technical question, rather, is vanilla and chocolate are the top two cupcake flavors, which I must hold in high regard because I capitalized both of those words. Vanilla and chocolate are the top 2 cupcake flavors. What is the third most popular cupcake flavor? Do we happen to know? If you think you know, it's a fill-in-the-blank question. You go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can put in whatever answer you would like there. And I've just been scrolling through. There's a butterscotch, a lot of strawberries, some lemons, red velvet, pumpkin spice. Oh, it's that time of year to have those. So maybe you know. Now, this is just a test, of course. This is something that we can use just to make sure your Socrative is working. I'm not going to be asking you cupcake questions for the rest of the hour. The rest of the hour will be Security Plus questions. I promise you there will be no more cupcake questions. Actually, sadly, there will be no more cupcake questions. But the reason I ask this is so we can make sure that you're in Socrative, you're able to answer things properly, and it looks like a number of you are logged in and working through those pieces. Let's see what the answer really is. Well, red velvet, apparently, the third most popular cupcake flavor. Now, this, of course, is up for debate. This was a third-party website that did a very non-scientific test. I think that's a pretty good third, don't you? The reason I asked this, of course, is today, October the 18th, National Chocolate Cupcake Day. That's a pretty good day right there. I'll take that. Maybe we can just end the study group right there. We've had everything we needed to do. We talked about cupcakes. We're finished. No, I've got plenty more. There's lots more that we're going to do today. First, let's talk about the current state of the Security Plus certification. The current state is that there are 2 tests that you could take right now. The one that has been out for the last 3 years or so is the SY0401. That's the version of the exam that you could opt to take right now. You could opt to take it through July of 2018. And if you're starting to study or you need to study for Security Plus right now, it's a very viable alternative because all of this study material is out there in the world ready for you to use. It's a lot of good material there too. So if you're planning to take the Security Plus, a lot of people say that they're going to take the latest one. They're going to take the newest one. But don't think that the newest one is better, because whether you take the older 401 or the brand new 501, you get exactly the same certification. They're not qualified. There's no marker on it that says what version of the exam you took. So right now, your much better choice as far as materials to study from as we speak today on October the 18th, 2017, is probably the SY0401. Now, the SY0501 exam was released on October the 4th, so a couple weeks ago. So everybody's working on their 501 books and 501 videos. I, of course, have 501 content that will be coming out. There's no reason you should wait for this. There's a 9-month overlap. If you start studying now, you'll certainly be ready to take the exam before July. Let's hope in that case. It is still only one exam, regardless of what version you take. It's still 90 minutes long. There's still a maximum of 90 questions. Nothing changes with the passing score or the scale used on the exam. Functionally, exactly the same process. Content, extremely different between the two. The content is very different on the 501 than it is the 401. I would estimate half the content's brand new. That's it. That's an extensive change to the exam. So obviously you cannot study for the 401 and then walk into the 501 and expect to do very well. You will not do well. You will probably fail. Do not study for one of these versions and go try to take the other exam. If you're studying from 401 materials, take the 401 exam. If you're studying from 501 materials, take the 501 exam. That seems very straightforward and obvious, but it's something that's extremely important when you're getting ready to take this exam. The content is not interchangeable much at all. The work that we've had to go through, that's why it's taking so long to get all these new courses out. It's practically a new exam. And it's completely changed around. You're going to get multiple choice questions. You're going to get performance-based questions. It's effectively exactly the same format as the 401. So make sure that you pick the right one. You get the study materials that match the exam that you've decided to go with, and you stick with that, because you're not going to be able to go back and forth with this. People have asked, am I going to have 501 videos, a video course? Absolutely. It's already well underway. Production's already started. Am I going to have a 501 course notes? Absolutely. goes along with the course. So that's one of those situations where it works very nicely to have that there. Let's do some questions from Security Plus. One of the things I've done now for this Security Plus study group going forward is, at least until a number of months have gone by, we're going to talk about content that is applicable to either the 401 or the 501. It's both of them. It works 401 and the 501. It's not an or, it's an and. All of these questions apply whether you will be taking the 401 exam or the 501 exam. Does not matter. All of this works for you. So we're in good shape. I'm not giving you something that doesn't apply to the exam that you will be taking. Have I confused this completely? Probably. Here's our first question, though. And by the way, the questions that I do, the first question that I do in the study group, I like to do as a performance-based question. I mentioned that on the exam, a lot of it is multiple choice, but a lot of it are questions that are not multiple choice. The first section of questions you get on the exam may be multiple choice, fill in the blank, matching. It may put you at a command line and ask you to perform a function. It may ask you to configure a wireless access point for security. You never know what they may ask. So the first question I'm going to ask of you is also a performance-based question that it's kind of a matching question. So here's our first question. Here we go. The question is, match the technology to the descript, you can't see because my big head's in the way there, to the description. There it is. And I'm going to click next here so you see it show up in your Socrative. This is a fill in the blank. So you're going to be filling in the blank. Really, you can use the number and letters. If you think that the technology and descriptions match up perfectly, your answer would be 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and 5E. Now, of course, it doesn't match up that way. But let me read off the technologies and read off the descriptions, and then you can figure it out. The first technology is a hash. The second is a collision. Number 3 is salt. Number 4 is key stretching. And number 5 is PFS. And as I mentioned, all of those they're on the 401 exam and they're on the 501 exam. So you can't go wrong here. Here are the descriptions. A, increase the strength of a weak key. B, verify the integrity of a downloaded file. C, protect passwords stored on disk. D, real-time key exchange. And E, 2 documents have the same hash. So that's what we want to do. We want to match these things up. Maybe one is, you pick number 1, it's going to match one of those. And it's a 1-to-1 match all the way through. There are 5 technologies and there are 5 descriptions. So it's a 1-to-1 with each one of those. You can draw a line if you want between each one of those and you'll have a 1-to-1 when we're done with this. This is one where I mention every month, but it's one where CompTIA isn't asking you a definition of a word. They're not asking you what the acronym means. They're always asking you, how do you use this technology? How do you take advantage of this technology? How is it implemented in this world of security that we deal with? So I'm not asking you the definition of a hash or a collision or salt or key stretching or PFS. I'm asking you, what do these things do for you? How are they valuable? How can you make this work better for you? Now make a note of your answers, because when you submit them into Socrative, you can't see them anymore. It's kind of late to mention that. 31 or 32 of you have already put them in. You've locked them in, as we say in the match game. You've locked them in, and now you wonder. See, now match game is a reference that actually works. Now there's actually an applicable reference. A year or two ago, that wouldn't have worked so well. So maybe you know the answers. Let's go through these and see if we got them right. A number of you are doing a lot of Googling, I've noticed. Yes, I can see you. I see you Googling. Let's step through these. Let's start with the first technology, a hash. What would a hash best represent? How could we use the hash based on all of the things that are listed here? What is the best? Again, this is the thing that always gets you with the CompTIA exam, is you have to find the best match for all of these. So the hash is B, verify the integrity of a downloaded file. You may see this all the time where you're downloading a file and they put a little hash right next to it. That way, when you download it, you can run the same hashing algorithm and see if it matches what was posted on the website. Then you know you downloaded the file properly. There's no problems with the file. There's no corruptions. You got exactly the same file that was listed on there. No man in the middle doing anything weird. So let's do another one. Collision is next on our list. Collision. Well, in a collision, two documents might have the same hash. That's E, 2E. So one was B, 2 is E. A collision, obviously, something you don't want in hashing. For hashing, if you've got a completely different plain text, it should always have a very different hash. You never want two things that are a different plain text to have the same hash. That's bad. There's a number of hashing algorithms that we found to be cryptographically weak because of that. And so we've decided to maybe use others. And of course, it depends on what you're using the hash for as to whether this would really be something bad or not. Okay, number 3, assault. Two peanuts are walking down the street. One was assaulted. Had to throw that in. 3, assault. Go straight across to C. C is protect passwords stored on the disk. This is one where a hash might have applied here, but if you are someone who is storing a hashed password, you never want to store it in its default hashed form. It's way too easy to use a rainbow table or do any reversing of what the possible passwords might be to come up with the original hash. So you salt it, which means everybody's password could be exactly the same. But if you look at all the hashes stored on disk, all the hashes are different. It makes it very difficult if the bad guys get a hold of that hashing table to figure out, that password table, to figure out how they can reverse all of these hashes. Adds another wrench into the mix. Let's do another one. 4 was key stretching. Key stretching is used to increase the strength of a weak key. It allows us to use the key many times, multiple times. One very common form of key stretching is to encrypt it with a key, and then you encrypt the encryption with a key, and then you encrypt that encryption with a key, and on and on. Now, on the other end, of course, you have to decrypt it that many number of times to be able to do that. But that's one where it does become in handy. There's some nice libraries that allow you to do this very easily if you're a developer, you're programming an application, where you just throw it in and be able to use these, what used to be a weak key, and use it much more securely. And number 5, PFS matches to the only other option left, which is D, real-time key exchange. This PFS is one you will run into on a number of different, usually web servers are running PFS, this perfect forward secrecy. That's one where instead of using a key that is a secret key that is on the web server, every session gets a new set of keys built for it. So somebody captured the data going back and forth between you and that web server. They would somehow have to find where that key came from. They'd have to get their hands on that private key, which is extremely difficult because it's not stored anywhere and it's only used for your session, and then it's thrown away. It's very ephemeral in the way that you work with those. So chat room, yeah, you got one right. See, this is the benefit, though, is even if you didn't get all 5, hopefully now you've got a perspective on how these technologies are used. And if you're ever asked about any of them in any form on any future exam, now you know what these might apply towards. Now, one of the questions in the chat room, this comes up a lot with performance-based questions, is what if you got one of them right? Does that count for any type of partial credit? CompTIA has probably intentionally been very, very vague on this particular answer. They do have a frequently asked questions on their website, which has changed over time. The initial answer to this that they did post publicly on their website was that it's extremely rare for them to provide any type of partial credit on performance-based questions. And at that point, I thought, well, nobody would ever get performance-based, and not a lot of the questions lend themselves towards any type of partial credit. This one might. I think this question could lend itself towards partial credit. But the way that they worded it in that frequently asked questions response was that it's so rare that it's either an all or nothing scenario. Now, what they've done on their website, they've changed the answer, actually, since then. The answer now is that, yeah, you might get partial credit. So I have a feeling that they either corrected something that was not correct, or maybe they changed the way they grade the tests. It's hard to tell. And the answer, of course, for us is we'll never know, because CompTIA does not share their grading methodology. They don't tell you what questions you got right and which questions you got wrong. They just give you a final score. We're kind of silly for us. We have no way to know if they're grading it properly. We're just sort of trusting that they're doing it. But there it is. That's the system we got. That's the system we're going to go with. And that's effectively the answer for that particular one. So if you answered 1B, 2E, 3C, 4A, and 5D, you got 100% on that one. Well done. It's kind of tough. If you miss one of those, then you've missed two, at least. Kind of a bummer, isn't it? Let's now do some multiple choice questions, though. Let's jump to another one. Now we can do an A, B, C, D, or E answer. Maybe we can find the ones that are wrong. I've got an answer for you to start with. The question is, which of the following would be the best way to prevent XSS? Whatever that is, XSS. Which of the following would be the best way to prevent this? Your possible answers are: A is strong passwords, B is input validation, C is least privilege, D is encrypted transport protocols, and E is updated antivirus signatures. You're already answering. Some of you already know this. You're punching it in to know what these things are. Now, a reminder for everybody in the chat room: no hints, no comments on the question, maybe until we're at least talking about the answer. Make sure you don't talk about what these things happen to be. Make sure you don't put any answers in there. You wouldn't do that, would you? You would instead figure out the details of XSS and what this might be. Yeah, there's no 50-50 on this one. So maybe you can get rid of some of these, though. Yeah, if you don't know what an XSS is, that is a little bit more of a problem. Actually not. You're probably Googling it. So stop Googling it. We want to pretend that we are sitting at the exam, that there is no Google in front of us. They've taken our phone away from us. It's locked in a closet somewhere outside. This is one where you're just in a room with probably a erasable pen and some type of laminated sheet of paper that doesn't work very well. And you're trying to figure it out. So maybe you'll be able to put these things together. Now, if you go to professormesser.com/QA, you can answer it if you're watching this live. And if you're not watching it live, you can stay right here and you can watch us answer it for the different pieces. Yes, Google's broken for the next hour. Interestingly enough, as I was starting up the live stream, YouTube was pretty broken. I have about 1,700 videos on my channel, and it said that I didn't have any videos. So this is great to be clicking through there and ready to start things up and wondering, did someone break in and delete all of my videos? Which would just be a thing. That would be delightful. So that did not happen. It was simply a bug on the YouTube side. They fixed it quickly, and here we are. Thankfully, everything's working. Let's see how we did with these. How did we do? Well, you can see 71% of you chose input validation, 20% chose de-encrypted transport protocols, and then single digits for everything else. 5% for least privilege, 3% for updated antivirus signatures, only 1% said strong passwords. What if that was the right answer? That's what I always wonder. If that really did turn out to be the correct answer, would that be a thing? Let's see how we do. Let's talk about XSS. XSS is cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting is quite an annoying problem when somebody is able to have put something into one site and have it affect something else on your browser screen. A little bit of a challenge when those things happen. This is why we always talk about not clicking things you don't trust in your emails, because someone could take you to a site that would then feed some input and output between these windows on your screen, and that would be a problem for maybe somebody trying to delete all the videos on my YouTube channel. That's not what you want. JavaScript is a very common way to perform cross-site scripting attacks. And one of the things that people will always say is that you should consider disabling JavaScript. Now, by the way, for those of you watching that aren't familiar, JavaScript is a completely different thing than Java. You wouldn't know it by looking at the names. They are completely different technologies in the way they operate. Java, you absolutely want to disable in your browser. There's no good reason for you to do anything related to Java in your browser unless you have a very specific thing that you do with Java in a browser. And if you do, you already know this, and this is not a problem for you. But Java has so many security vulnerabilities associated with it, it makes sense to get rid of it. And although people tell you that disabling JavaScript is a good way to protect against cross-site scripting, it's also a good way to completely limit your online browsing experience. It's almost pointless to do this. None of the sites you go to will work anymore because you've disabled JavaScript. I guess if you did it on a one-by-one basis with sites you trust and that kind of thing, it might be useful. That's a little bit more of a challenge. It's probably easier to make sure that you keep your browser updated, keep updated all the applications that use the browser. Hopefully you're visiting sites that update their applications. For example, I've got WordPress running on professormesser.com. I make sure my WordPress is updated to the latest version so that there are any known vulnerabilities associated with cross-site scripting. Those vulnerabilities have been corrected, and we're running a version that is not susceptible to those. That vulnerability does not exist in the version of WordPress that I'm using. So I try to keep updated all the time, so that's not going to be a big deal. And perhaps probably the thing that is most important if you're developing an application is to validate the input so that somebody can't put their own JavaScript into an input box and have it show up on your site. That is a significant thing that is probably missed a lot by application developers because there's so many ways to get input into these applications, and they just don't think about validating every single one of those sources or validating it in the right way. For example, someone should not be able to put a script into a login field and have that script do anything. You should be able to, the programmer should already be able to look, if somebody's putting in their username and password, it shouldn't include JavaScript. That's just one example of cross-site scripting. It's a very good example of how to protect against cross-site scripting. And if we go back and look at the number of people answered, 72% of you answered B, input validation. Indeed, that is the correct answer. That would be, given these 5 options, the best way to prevent cross-site scripting. People say there's different ways to look at these questions. Well, there's really only one way to look at these questions. You look at the question, you look at the 5 possible answers, and that's it. You know, there are better ways to protect against cross-site scripting. For example, turn off your computer. That would protect against cross-site scripting, but that's not one of your options here. You only have the choice of what they give you. So make sure you choose the best option given what's there. Don't read into it. Every question is its own little world. Make sure you focus on what's being asked of you and what the possible answers are and choose the right one. So input validation, good answer. Strong passwords won't help you with cross-site scripting. That gets around any type of passwords. They're taking advantage of a vulnerability where passwords is not your biggest problem. Least privilege is a way to set up privileges for a user where they are only able to do the things on that system that are appropriate for that user. If it's somebody in shipping and receiving, they're only able to ship and receive. They aren't able to go in and modify spreadsheets in the accounting department, for example. That has nothing to do with cross-site scripting either, because cross-site scripting ostensibly gets around some of these limitations that we built into the systems. Encrypted transport protocols doesn't help because this problem is one that is occurring in your browser screen or on the server that you're hitting. The channel of communication between is not really the issue because ultimately this is happening once the information is decrypted and running on that particular server or that particular client. And updated antivirus signatures. Cross-site scripting is not something that's generally caught by antivirus signatures, so that's not going to help you either. The answer here, obvious, B, input validation. That is the best answer here at 72%. Well done. Let's do another question. Let's jump to question number 4 that we have here. The question is, here, we'll put it on this screen right here. Which of these would be most associated with X.500? Which of these would be most associated with X.500? Maybe we know the answer to this. I have some possible answers to choose from. The possible answers are HTTPS, LDAP, RSA, SHA, SSS. Which of these would be most associated with X500? I think this may be a gimme for some of you. Some of you may know this one already. We're going to find out. HTTPS, LDAP, RSA, SHA, triple S. Maybe you do know. I think a lot of you do. I can tell when the numbers go up quick, might be easier than what I was shooting for with this particular. This one is more of a definitional answer. This one is a gimme. So there's always one gimme in here, right? Maybe this is the one. I try to make it so that 50% of you may know or may not know. We're gonna take care of some of these problems really easily. Which one of these? So that's, yeah, maybe now you're feeling good about yourself. We'll put it right at the beginning. So this particular question is one that everybody thinks. I think actually this may not be as gimme as you might think. Because X500 is not something kind of jumps out at you with these pieces. In fact, X500, I look at that and wonder, I could go actually need a couple directions with technology because I have to remember what X500 is. This is one that you either know or you don't know associated with these things. I think in this case, I mentioned I try to make it so that you get about 50% of folks getting these right and getting these wrong. In this case, we can see that 52% said LDAP. We have almost 20% said HTTPS, kind of a tie for a third between RSA and SHA. And then you've got triple DES at 6%. So did we get 50%? Did we hit that number? Is that the right answer for X500? Let's find out. X500, we're going to know right away because I'm going to tell you all about LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. If you're doing anything with security, you will probably be doing some things with LDAP. It helps if you become very familiar with LDAP, the way it's structured, how it's used. You're going to be using this for authentications, for your firewalls, for your switches, for your routers, for your VPNs. Integration with Microsoft Active Directory is used in so many places. This X500 is a standard specification that allows applications to properly communicate to the LDAP server over a very standardized way. So you can, for example, authenticate against a Microsoft Active Directory database by a device that has nothing to do with Microsoft. But because they both speak that LDAP standard language, which is X500, then we know that they're going to be able to communicate back and forth properly. This came from a technology called DAP. That is one that ran way back in the day on a protocol stack called OSI. That was the protocol stack that we used for the OSI model. Ironically, the OSI model still around. The OSI protocol, nowhere to be seen because IP won. Ironically, we used the OSI model turned out to be pretty awesome because we can really apply almost everything we do the OSI model. Unfortunately, the protocol, not quite the same longevity. We very often see this if you're going to and accessing an X500 directory, the standardized format for an LDAP directory. You do it using this LDAP protocol, and you'll find this everywhere. Not only, as I mentioned, in Microsoft Active Directory, you'll find it in Apple Open Directory. There's an open version of this called Open LDAP. So it just depends on how you're implementing this LDAP server to make these things happen. So if you're one of the folks that answered B LDAP, the 56% of you got that one right. Would not be HTTPS. We don't use X500 with HTTPS, although there are things you can do on a web server to access an LDAP database. That's not the most associated technology with X500, given the options available to you on the screen. RSA, a key exchange protocol, again, not something you would commonly see or associate directly with X500. SHA, if you're doing some type of hashing, that's useful, but not useful, has really not much to do at all with X500. And triple DES, an encryption protocol, again, not something very well associated with X500, certainly not even directly associated. The one answer on here that jumps right out at you that is most associated by far is the B LDAP at 57%. So well done with that. A lot there to look at. There is so much to know on this Security Plus exam. The 401 I thought was enormous. The 501 is super enormous. The 501, yeah, see, the folks in the chat room are mentioning the X509 is different than X500. You have to be careful. Your certificate formats versus your LDAP formats. Make sure you think about that and working through those. There is a lot going on these exams. The exams for Security Plus 401 are just everything you need to know. There's cloud computing in there, encryption technologies, there's hashing, there is functional structures, policies, procedures, there's tools that you need to know. All of these things that kind of break out these pieces associated with this. I've gone through every single one of my videos. And what I did was in every video, I take every bit of text and all the important pieces and graphics and things that are in there, and I put them into one single document. This is my Security Plus course notes. These course notes really have everything there. Now, I, of course, recommend for you to go through all of my videos, take your own notes. But if you're like me, there's 250 different Security Plus videos. You may not be able to make it through all of those. Well, you've got plenty more to go through. I've made this PDF. This is an enormous PDF that's well over, the total content's 35 pages of notes that are in here. And as I flip through really quickly, you can kind of see the detail. You can recognize some of the graphics from these. The Security Plus exam, lots of text. And that's where that text comes right from the videos. So if you're somebody that likes the content that's in there, this isn't your primary source of study, obviously. You need a good Security Plus book. You need to watch the videos. You need to do some Q&A. But when you need that last-minute study, this might be something you want to consider. You can find out about the study at professormesser.com/securitycn. That's my Security Plus course notes. You can find out. Only $15. And by the way, it does help keep all of this running. All of these crazy things going on effectively helps create the new Security Plus series as well. So you're, of course, paying it forward to all the other people that will be taking the next set of videos that comes out. Something that also helps, I think, when you're studying. So you might want to look at that. There's also a printed version of this you can get as well. Where's my book? Got it right here. So here's the Security Plus book. It's a real physical printed bound, perfect bound book that has my course notes in it. There they are. It's kind of hard to see with the bright light. There they go. So the same set of course notes, and I think it's another $15. So it's $30 for this. What do I mean? I think I'm the one that decided on it. It's all full color, all the graphics and everything that are in here. So it costs a little bit more than a traditional book to print. But there's so many great graphics in here that I really felt it was necessary to make this full color. So for another $15, you'll get not only the printed version, but you also get the digital version. So it's a little bonus. And I do take Bitcoin for those in the chat room that are asking. So there's an option for that when you check out. There is, if you already have the digital version, you're like, oh, I want that printed version, just send me a note, hit the Contact Us link at the top. I can give you a link that will get you there. Only Bitcoin currently, only BTC currently, sorry. No other cryptographic currencies are currently available, sorry. But if you send me a link, I can give you a credit towards what you've already spent. So you may want to get this. Yeah, there's only 1,500 different cryptographic currencies out there. I went with Bitcoin, so we got the piece that might be there, having those pieces. And now we've got a lot of things going in the chat room. They're now discussing the viability of international currencies. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. Thanks so much for your ongoing support, by the way. Every little bit helps keep everything going here, and would not be able to do it without your support. So for those of you that have invested in these course notes and the other products on my website, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Let's get another question right here, right now. The question is, which of the following would be the best choice for a transport encryption protocol? Which of these? Would I take a bottle of rum as payment? No, but scotch. Scotch would work. That's my kryptonite is scotch. Which of the following would be the best choice? The options are A, MD5, B is NTLM, C is SHA, D is PFS, E is IPsec. Did you see that? There's a little bit of a callback there. You may recognize some of these terms already. So if you remember what we were talking about, you may be able to either say that's the one or that is not the one based on things that we already talked about. Maybe you know. And maybe you already worked with some transport encryption protocols, that these might be things you work with. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and answer the question right there. I always wonder, is this the gimme? I'm never quite sure. I usually write these questions about, it's usually the Friday or Saturday before. So I sit down. It usually takes half a day to write out all the questions, get the answers that I'd like, make the answers hard enough, put them into Socrative, build out the web pages, the presentations for the presentation itself in Keynote, get everything ready to go. It takes about half a day. So I'm going through these questions wondering, is this a good one? Is it not a good one? Again, I'm shooting for that 50%. I want 50% of you to get this one right. And another way to look at it, I want 50% of you to get this one wrong. That's an awful, awful way to look at it. But that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to make every question everybody gets 100%. Nobody learns anything. I want us to at least think about these questions. Why would that be the right answer for this one? And this one really is more of a definitional question. So this one should be relatively easy for us to do. Let's see how we did with this one. 77%. That's a pretty good number if that's the right answer, said IPsec. Maybe that's the right answer. We did get to double digits. 11% said SHA. We have a tie for third, effectively, PFS and MD5, and then only 1% said NTLM. NTLM for only got 1%. No respect for NTLM. Oh, don't, in the chat room where they're now talking about Scotch. We could go on a long time about Scotch. A long time. So we're not going to. Instead, we're going to talk about IPsec. IPsec is indeed the right answer with this one. IPsec is IP security. We are securing things at that third level of the OSI model. So we're securing things once you get past the MAC address, and in some cases, a little bit farther. We actually can do quite a bit of encryption with data that's going through. What's nice about IPsec, it not only provides that encryption, there's methodologies, technologies here to provide integrity into this. So we can prevent someone trying to replay traffic through an IPsec tunnel. We're effectively signing the packets as they're going through. It's an extremely standardized method of transport encryption. And that's why you can get a firewall from one company, you can get a server from another company, you can build an IPsec tunnel between them, and it works perfectly. By hopefully most of the time. Most of the time it works perfectly. 99% of the time it works perfectly. It's that 1% of the time where something is not quite perfect. And usually it's something because one side is a very old firewall that supports a different set of encryption ciphers, and you're connecting to a newer device that doesn't support some of those older encryption ciphers. But the core protocol is the same between them. You may often see the authentication header that's commonly used for the signing, the integrity part of the packets, the authentication, if you will, thus the name, authentication header. And then you also have the encryption part, which is the encapsulation security payload, the ESP. We won't go into a lot of details about IPsec. I've got a whole video on that. You can learn all about IPsec and working through the details of that. But that's absolutely the right answer for this one, which is E, IPsec, your best choice for transport encryption protocol. MD5 is a hashing algorithm. It's not used to do any type of encryption. It doesn't protect or provide confidentiality for anything. So you would not be able to use that for encryption. It's great for passwords and to check the integrity of a file that you downloaded, but doesn't work very well for that. For the same reason, SHA is not the right answer, because that's also a hashing algorithm. So you can't use that for any type of protection, any type of confidentiality, to use the security term for this, the encryption part. PFS, the perfect forward secrecy, as we mentioned, was a key exchange protocol and ephemeral key exchange protocol. It's only used temporarily. Kind of nice for a transport protocol, but it's used to exchange keys. That's not actually doing the encryption part. That's only to get one key from a private key pair set up between two devices without actually sending the key across the network, which is so cool, but doesn't help with the actual encryption part, which is the part that's done after you've exchanged the keys. And NTLM, NT LAN Manager, Microsoft NT LAN Manager, was an older authentication protocol that you'll still see kicking around out there. Almost everybody's moved to Kerberos, but you'll still see it in some really older technologies. The 1% of you, probably that's about as much as you'd ever see it out there, is about 1%, probably less than 1% these days. And that's why EIPsec was really the best answer there to be able to do this. If you're watching this video, this hour-long Q&A that we're doing in this first hour for continuing education credit, then you may want to, this is for 1 hour of webinar credit. What you'll want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link right there. And in that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address, put that this is the October 2017 Security Plus Study Group, so that I can look it up very easily. And then you want to put this special code word, which is, I'll throw you a little sideways here, NTLM. Special code word is NTLM, since the folks in the chat room who are the 1% really like that one. That's the word we're going to use this month. So that when I receive these, I will reply to you with a certified message in my email that says you must have watched this because you gave me this information in this format using the method I just told you, which means you must have been watching this. So if you put in there anywhere NT LAN Manager, New Technology LAN Manager, what Microsoft called it. In fact, NT wasn't around when LAN Manager came out. It's kind of how NT got around. Anyway, I will reply to you with a digitally signed email that says you must have watched this. Here's your hour of continuing education credits. And you have to be able to do this using those specific instructions. If you don't get the credit. So make sure you do that and being able to have that there. So it's one of those things you can always think about when you're going through all those pieces. Let's do another question. We've got time for more. It's not over. We have stuff to go through. Here's another question. This one, which of these would be the best way to protect private web server keys used in a production environment? Which of these would be the best way to protect private web server keys used in a production environment? The possible answers are A, PGP, B is TPM, C is FDE, D is HSM, and E is UEFI. So it's quite a few to choose from. It's PGP, TPM, FDE, HSM, and UEFI. All of those, by the way, real actual security technologies. So, which one is it going to be? We have to make sure you read the questions, make sure you read the answers, make sure you're able to remove ones that you may not know offhand. Maybe you happen to know what these happen to be. If you think you do, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can answer it. I think you might know this one. I'm going to take a sneak peek. So I flip over to this slide so I can take a sneak peek and see how it's going. And then I'll start saying things that maybe it's a gimme, maybe it isn't. That's it. And by the way, a good point in the chat room from Baratech, which is if you don't know, answer something. Never leave a question blank on the exam. As we're speaking today in October of 2017, you only get credit. You only get points if you get a question right. If you get a question wrong, we don't believe you get credit taken away from you. We don't believe that's the way it works. So your advantage is to answer everything. If you don't know, on your exam, it's probably 1 out of 4 options. It's a 25% chance. Just click it, go with that. Don't leave anything blank when you hit the We're Finished button. Make sure you fill in any answers to questions, even if you don't know what they are. Make sure you know about that. Now, that might change in the future. It probably won't. Hasn't changed in 15 years. But they might change it tomorrow. But today, we believe that's the way it works because, of course, we don't know the way it works for sure. We think that's the way it works. That's what I'm going with, and I think you should too. Let's see how we did with this one. It's a tie for first, a 3-way tie. Ouch. Which would it be? So the possible answers we chose, 30% of you said PGP, 30% of you said TPM, 32% of you said HSM, and then single digits dropped way off for full disk encryption and UEFI. So which one would it be? Do we know? This is one where we really do need to think about which possible answer it would be. Now, the real key for this one was which of these would be the best way to protect. There's two special keys here. Private web server keys, that's number one, and the second key piece of information in a production environment. And private web server keys in a production environment, they always have to be there. They always have to be available. Now, private web server keys and production environments, how do you keep those secure? How do you manage a security environment with that type of technology? It has to always be there, or else you won't be able to encrypt anything to a web server. But then how do you protect it? Well, the way that you protect it in these enterprise environments, imagine if you have one web server. On ProfessorMesser.com, we have multiple web servers. Some websites have hundreds and hundreds of web servers. And the way that you protect all of those keys is through something called a hardware security module, or an HSM. This is a device that's not just a storage space. It's not just a place to store the keys, although it does an extremely good job at that. But it's also something that can back up your keys and back them up into a secured environment. But it can also sit between your users and your web server and provide the SSL, what really is TLS today, the SSL encryption. It can sit right in the middle and be the endpoint for the encryption and hand off non-encrypted data to your web server. That's because web servers having to do the whole key exchange process, there's a little bit of an overhead associated with it. There's a little extra work that has to be done by the CPU to make that happen. And on web servers, your CPU is pretty important. You want to make sure everybody's able to use the web server. And if you have a lot of people hitting the server at once, it could use a lot of time just dealing with key exchange and setting up this scenario. But if you put this in the middle, it's able to offload that function because it's got hardware. And of course, it's not part of your web server, so it does it very, very fast. You'll see these used in very large environments. They'll cluster them together. There's redundancy associated with them. They're an integral part of the web server technologies that are being used. And of course, extremely important to be able to use those in those scenarios too. So make sure you think about what you're doing with those. Now, if we look at our possible answers, HSM, 32% of you, so the largest number of people did answer HSM by 2%. So that's good. We have that there. At least we've got that opportunity to have those here. Now, we know that these other options here are ways to perform protection of data, to provide confidentiality, to encrypt data. For example, PGP, pretty good privacy. Or the GPG, which is the GNU Privacy Guard, which is the open source version of the same PGP encryption. So PGP, certainly a great way to do encryption. In fact, when I send you your 1 hour continuing education unit email, I'm going to digitally sign it with GPG. So that's a great way to provide this cryptography. I'm not encrypting it. You could, of course, send me your request in encrypted. No, you can't because it's from my web server. You could send me an email in encrypted form. But the PGP is not used to do this in real time with private web server keys in a production environment. So that's not. PGP was not outlawed by the U.S. That's not correct. They wanted to, though. There's a great story about that. I can talk in the after show about a conversation I had with Phil Zimmerman regarding that very thing. 29% said TPM, the Trusted Platform Module, is a piece of cryptography hardware generally located inside of your client devices, inside of your computer, inside of your mobile devices. Some interesting problems with the TPM have come out this week. Everybody's talking about the crack for the crack vulnerability associated with WPA2, but really it's problems with older TPMs that was the big problem this week that nobody really talked about. That was a bad one. FDE, full disk encryption. We don't do full disk encryption with server keys in a production environment. If we did, it really wouldn't apply to protection of these in real time on these production environments. We generally don't use that. That's not a good way to protect it because by the time we've decrypted it, we're already using it. That's effectively no help at all. And UEFI is a type of BIOS. We are not storing private web server keys or using them in a production environment that have anything to do with BIOS. So that's one of those. It's in a device. So this comes directly from, by the way, I'm putting in, you'll notice after all of these slides, I put in where these are from. I'm putting in the reference to the SY0501, But there is, as I mentioned, all of these questions today also have an SY0401 component. So you should be able to search through my 401 videos and find exactly the same format on there as well with those pieces. Your folks in the chat room, you're not going to be able to fast forward. If you can, please let me know how you did that. There's a whole tachyon issue associated with that, and I don't have any associated with this live stream. Eventually, we're going to get there. Like, yeah, let's get to the next question already. Okay, I think we could do that. We could probably get that. So those of you that did answer the HSM, which was answer D, you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. Very quickly, I do want to tell you that the folks at GTS Learning have set up labs that will allow you to set up an IPsec tunnel or do PGP or work with hashes or do all of these pieces. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/seclabs. But this is one it's all virtualized. It's all in your browser. You can do whatever you want. It's not on a rail. It's not like you have to do one thing and then another thing and another thing. It's a full-blown virtual environment. So you really do learn from a real Windows operating system, using a real router, using real Linux devices. They're all out there to work with. You don't need any software on your computer, just a browser. It's like magic. I've demonstrated this in earlier study groups. We don't have time today to go through the details, but if you do follow that link, you get a special price. ProfessorMesser.com/seclabs takes you, instead of $169, you're paying $109 over on the GTS Learning website. Plus, the GTS Learning folks are great. They include their Security Plus books. They include Q&A. It's a great little bundle to have that there, and something you should try, something that may be worthwhile if you're someone who wants to have hands-on with those. Stick around in this. We got another question to go, but stick around for the second half. We're going to do some Q&A directly from the chat room for those of you asking. But I've got another question for you. We got time for one more. Which of these authentication factors would be best associated with an Android swipe pattern? This came up in a chat that I was doing, I think on a Slack chat I had this previous week. And I thought this would be a good one to put in here. Which of these authentication factors would be best associated with an Android swipe pattern? Your possible answers are something you are, something you have, something you know, somewhere you are, or something you do. Those authentication factors, which one would be best associated with an Android swipe pattern? It was quite a conversation we were having about this particular authentication factor. I'll tell you about it when we get through these pieces. No Googling this one. This is one I really want to see if you know. Just give it a shot and have this here. Maybe that would be the way to do it. This one also, I think we were having quite an argument about it. So if this is one where you've answered it one way, you think that's got to be the way it is. It's really sort of one that you have to think about the way this is, the way this really does work. And I think you could probably go two ways with this, but there's really only one good answer. The one answer I'm looking for on how this operates and how this works. And how okay, no hints. I won't tell you. I'm not going to tell you, but we got enough people have answered here so I can tell you what I think it is or what you think it is. 68% of you have said something you know. 25% of you, that's a good strong number too, have said something you do. And then single digits, 5% said something you are, 5% said something you have, only 1% said somewhere you are. Yeah, maybe everybody got it wrong. It wasn't any of those. Trick question. No, there really is one of those answers to have this here. But what could it possibly be? Let's see if we can figure out all the different possibilities of this. The answer, and you can fight with me about this, and I'm fine with that, by the way. The answer, and I really think this is the answer, is something you do. The answer is something you do. Now, the majority of you answered something you know. Only 24% of you answered something you do. So why would it be something you do and not something you know? It seems like it's something you know. You know how to do this Android swipe pattern. You commonly see this particular authentication factor, and I use that term with these air quotes around it because it's a really, really bad authentication factor. Nobody really does this authentication factor in a production environment or to protect anything worth its valuable At least not anything beyond signatures. We use this authentication factor all the time when we sign a credit card receipt. That's supposed to be an authentication factor. They're supposed to look at the back of your card, which you are supposed to sign. If you've not signed the back of your credit card, according to the contract you have with the credit card company, that card is not valid. You have to sign the card. So you sign the card, they compare the card to what you just signed, and that's an authentication factor. That's the way it's supposed to work. By the way, it never works. Worst authentication factor ever. Nobody ever check. They rarely check. I may have had one person check ever when I use my credit card. And they look at it and go, okay. They used to put pictures on credit cards. They don't do that any longer because the credit card companies, it's too difficult. They want people using the credit cards and they'll deal with problems afterwards. They're making so much money on the interest. They want you charging things, please. That's effectively what it comes into. One other very common something you do is the Android swiping pattern. Now, the question is, why is that something you do rather than something you know? So an Android swiping pattern, for those of you not familiar with it, I don't have an Android device hands nearby me. But the common Android swiping pattern is it puts 5 dots on the screen, and then you come up with a pattern of moving around those dots, those 9 dots, in a way that I can find a picture here instead of me doing this. This is not helpful to anyone. You find a way to make a pattern unique from those dots on your Android device. I'm sure I should have had I have an Android emulator that's on my computer here, but here's the pattern. Here's what you would normally see on an Android device, this pattern right here. See, I clicked that and that was a mistake. There we go. There's the pattern. So you would then decide, well, my pattern is going to be swipe, swipe, swipe. Make a little table leg out of it. Dun, dun, dun. Somebody else might just go swipe and make a circle. They might make a circle between all of these. But it turns out to be more of a signature type scenario. If you knew somebody who used a swipe pattern and you said, right now, I want you to tell me your swipe pattern. Tell me of these 9, number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What's the pattern? And I don't know if they'd be able to tell you. I do 6, 5, 4, 8. Do a 7, 3. They wouldn't be able to articulate to tell you numerically what that is because they use it like a signature. It's just it's muscle memory. It's just like a signature, just like signing the back of a credit card. So that's from my argument that is what this is. And of course, people now saying, no, your question was worded so that you were saying what I know. We get to fight about it now. Which of these authentication factors will be best associated with an Android swipe pattern? That was pretty straightforward. And it is a very, very weak question. That's not a CompTIA way. People always say that's a CompTIA question. CompTIA didn't come up with this technology. They didn't decide how we use these authentication factors. That's how we use them. So whenever you start thinking about how these factors are used, that's where it is. Now, this is one where, of course, we can all talk about if you don't know a signature, you can't do it either. But it's not something you know. It's something you do. See what I mean? People are saying, no, you have to know the swipe pattern, but you don't. You know a movement. You know it's something you do. But that's why it's such a very bad authentication factor. That's why we don't use it to protect anything of value. That's why we can now fight about it, but that is really how we use that authentication factor and work through all of those. If you have not downloaded the CompTIA exam objectives for Security Plus, go do this. There is probably the 4 ones out there. The 5 ones absolutely out there. So now you can download either one of these. Make sure you download the right one for the exam you're taking and choose either one of those to work through those pieces. It tells you everything you need to know. It tells you all about authentication factors. Tells you all about the hashing algorithms you need to know. Make sure it tells you all about the policies and the procedures and the tabletop and the disaster recovery and dealing with all of those security issues. Maybe that's it. And working through those pieces, It's the one thing that can help you pass the exam. It's your checklist that you should use before you walk into the exam and work through those pieces. My next Security Plus study group is on November the 15th. So I get a week off here, and then we've got A Plus on November 1st, Network Plus on November the 8th, and Security Plus on November 15th. And then we're off for 2 weeks. It's the holiday season here in the United States coming up. So that's one, working through those pieces. That's it. Now people are still on the website. No, because a PIN is something you know. So a swipe, it doesn't work that way. PIN is something you know, a personal identification number. You literally know the number. You could go up, even if the numbers are rearranged, if they were just straight across, you could punch in your PIN. If somebody took your swipe pattern and they put all the dots across, you wouldn't know how to swipe. I know, it's tough. But I'm sticking with that. That's it. That's what we're going to go with. And in fact, that is the right answer. And somebody was saying, we were talking about this in the chat room, they were saying these swipe patterns are not recognized by governmental entities, so therefore it doesn't count. Like, if you're basing your knowledge of security on the government, you are going to be in deep trouble when you go outside the government. So, because the private organizations do things completely differently with security than what a governmental agency does. They are completely different worlds in that respect. They use similar technologies, but they're used in different ways. And a private company will do things very, very different. They might use these swipe patterns as a significant authentication factor. They don't. Nobody does. We got plenty more of these study groups for you next month. Be sure to check in on the calendar. But until then, don't forget about the Security Plus course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. You've got the way to follow us is on professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Facebook/Instagram/a thing. Just type in the thing you think you might find me at, and maybe it will find me there. If it doesn't find me there, tell me that you would like me to be there, and I'll see what I can do. Make that happen. Discount vouchers are still available. professormesser.com/vouchers. My thanks again to GTS Learning and their live labs. Check those out at professormesser.com/seclabs. Stick around for the next hour. I'm opening up the phone lines. We're going to answer questions from the chat room. We're going to argue a lot about swipe patterns and Scotch. Who wouldn't want to listen to that? I want to thank you for joining us for this first hour. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. No, really. I get it. I understand completely what you're saying. I agree with you that it could indeed be something you know, but it's not used that way. It's something automatic. You don't even think about it. If you don't think about it, how can you know it? How do I feel about people downloading my videos from YouTube? They would be violating YouTube's terms of service. So they would be doing that illegally. I don't really feel about it at all. That's them performing an illegal action and using YouTube in a way that is not to be used. So that's on them. That's on them. And it's kind of pointless too, because a lot of good stuff's there on the YouTube. It doesn't help me. I don't get the views, and YouTube doesn't look at me like I'm worth anything if I don't get the views. There's a whole thing that goes on about that. About there's people watching, what are they watching, et cetera, et cetera. That is a ham radio behind me. I've got a lot of things behind me. What do I have? That is ham radio. It's an ICOM. It's a 720, IC 720. It's an older one. I got that. Can't see it. There it is. I got that ham radio on a government auction. I think a bad guy was using it. Is there another chat room, or is he talking to himself? A question for the ages. EDAC. A question for the ages. I'm looking at the chat room, by the way, that is on professormesser.com/live. It is the live event chat to have that there. So yes, I'm in Florida, so it's really useful to have an amateur radio set up. You never know when that next hurricane's coming through. Let me get the call-in set up, and then we'll go back to these questions that are showing up. There's almost no delay, by the way, between the video and the chat room. It's like 5 seconds now. It's down to almost nothing, which is really great, which is really useful. You're just wondering why it takes me so long to respond to these, because sometimes I'm not sure if I want to. That's why. Let's host a show. Let's start a show. One moment, I'm going to call into my own show. How does that work? Well, there it is. Call in. Here we go. Bleep, bleep, bleep. It's going to do the thing.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. We're going to type this thing in, and we're going to hit a pound sign.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I think we've had this conversation before, and that's redundant. And
welcome.
Why, thank you. Welcome. So now I can tell you that you could call in directly. If you don't want to leave a question in the chat room, you can call in directly at 855-785-RJ45, toll free in the continental U.S. If you're outside the continental U.S., you can use Skype for free. No Skype minutes required by putting a +1 855-785-7545. Question number 1, Linux commands in the exam. I had a few exam questions about Linux. These are not in the study guides or the notes. Is this something I should study? If it's not in the CompTIA exam objectives, don't waste your time. That is the thing that you should really focus on. Practically 100% of the questions come directly from the topics that are listed in the exam objectives. And what CompTIA unfortunately does occasionally is they put questions in that are not in the objectives, but they also don't grade you on them, and they don't tell you what questions those are. So your question effectively is, hey, should I study everything in the world? No, of course not. Study what's in the exam objectives. If you know everything that's in the exam objectives, you will pass your exam. I can say that. That's how close they stick to that list of objectives. So that's what I say whenever you do that. I do have also, since we're talking about the background, there is an all-white Rubik's Cube there that does, if I was to turn that on, it's actually colored. It's an electronic Rubik's Cube that's there. I should plug this in, let you see it sometime. We've got other questions coming through. And somebody asked about the crack WPA news. We can talk about that. We can talk about probably more importantly is ROCA. That was the real story in security this week, was ROCA, ROCA. That was the enormous vulnerability that has gone unmentioned effectively. WPA2 is almost not news anymore. It's almost fixed already. This is what we've run into. We're now chasing the sexy news, the clickable news with those. So the non-graded test questions, I don't think you get points for getting it right. But CompTIA doesn't tell us. We don't know. That's the scenario. Let's first go to the phones, then we'll circle back to the WPA2 stuff. And I can certainly talk more about that because everybody already has already. But we'll go to the 916 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, Professor Messer.
Hello.
My name is Susan Marquez.
Hey, Susan. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Yes, I have a question. Hey. Yeah, I got some of your notes. They're terrific. I recommend that to anyone
You're
who
awesome.
wants
Thank
to pass
you.
the vendor exam. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I passed CompTIA A+. And I have a question regarding the CompTIA Network Plus and the MTA Networking Fundamentals.
Okay.
What's the difference?
There's quite a significant difference between those two. For the people that aren't familiar, the MTA Network Fundamentals is a Microsoft certification. It's kind of their version of Network Plus, but it is dramatically slanted towards the Microsoft way of doing networking. So they go into great detail about work groups and home groups and domains and setting up IP addresses in a Windows environment and all of the Windows options that are inside of that. They spend a good bit of time on fundamentals as well, but they don't go deep into a lot of the other additional networking pieces that you'll find on Network Plus. So that's one where I think MTA networking, I don't see quite as many people or employers asking for it, but I like the content that's in there. It really just depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to go to a specific job where they have asked for the MTA networking fundamentals, or are you trying to be more broad in what you're doing and having a larger group of possible employers that are looking at you? Maybe Network Plus is the better idea, but the right answer is what you need it to do for you. Is there a particular direction you're thinking of going?
Yes, Professor. I'm thinking of going security, like network security,
Sure.
cyber. So I'm just confused if I have to retake my CompTIA Network Plus. I passed the MTA networking fundamentals. I have my Securities Plus, CompTIA Securities Plus certification, and looking forward for my Linux Plus.
Nice.
So do I have to retake my CompTIA Network Plus?
Well, if you haven't taken Network Plus yet, you've got the MTA fundamentals for networking.
Yes.
That might be good enough for an employer, but the people you're talking to, the employer, the people that are looking at these certifications, they're the ones that will be able to make that decision. There's no way that I can make that decision because I'm not the one doing the hiring. Some places want a bunch of Microsoft
it depends
certifications.
on the company.
Yeah, it just depends.
Oh, okay.
You are going the right direction, though. If you're looking at doing something in security, and I've said this before in a study group, get as much foundational information, foundational knowledge you have, and functional, real-time, hands-on knowledge you can get on networking. IT security is a huge bunch of networking with a security piece layered right on top of it. So you will be doing a ton with networking if you plan to get into IT security. The more, the better.
Thank you so much, Professor Messer.
Good luck, Susan.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
The one thing that I always default on and tell people is get as much networking as you can. I got into a system engineering role with a next generation firewall company. Now it was about 8 years ago. I stayed there almost 7 years. No, I guess it was 9 years ago. It was a long time ago. And stayed there a long time. I didn't have a formal Cisco certification. Most of what I had was networking certifications and other types of certifications from those pieces. So it's not required that you get a Cisco certification to be able to move up higher into security, but boy, it sure helps. It doesn't. You're not required to get a Network Plus to move up into those, but boy, it sure helps. I did have my Network Plus certification when I got there, but at that point, when you're getting into that level of technology with those types of folks dealing with that level of integration with firewalls, and now it's next generation, and you're dealing with IPS, and you're dealing with content filtering and the application firewalling and the whole aspect of connecting to a very large network, you need experience in BGP, you need experience in OSPF, you need experience in doing static routing, you need load balancing, ether channel, understanding intricacies of routing and how it will affect things when things fail over, being able to do IPsec tunnels, understanding IP addressing cold, like quick, be able to subnet in your head immediately. That's the level that you need to get to be a really functional at a very high level systems engineer. So that's what you want to work towards. The Security Plus just layers on top of that. Everything I just said was kind of networking, wasn't it? The security piece layers right on top of that, and working through those. So just another thing to think about when you go through that. Will the CEU credits from the Network Plus and Security Plus study groups be valid for A+ renewal? The renewal requirements for CEUs are that at least half of the material covered is associated back to one of the objectives in the certification that you're renewing. And security is in A+, and networking is in A+. So yes, they apply back to A+ as well. The circuit board that's behind me is I don't think that's my old Xbox. I think that one is an NLX box. I think it's an old sniffer, an old distributed sniffer. It's an NLX motherboard, which you never see anymore. And I put it there just because it's ancient and nobody likes it. It's actually a neat technology. But it's an old Intel motherboard, an Intel computer, NLX, which is not even covered in the A+ anymore. It used to be back in the day. And it's just there to because it's nice to have there right underneath the cigars, which is the important part. To have that there. Let's back to the phones. The 561 area code, South Florida. Are you there? What's your name?
Yes. Hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed calling.
Hey, Ed. Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about something that you mentioned on today's webinar about cross-site scripting.
Yeah.
And it appears that Equifax had this problem recently,
Oh,
as it was reported in the news. And they were saying that the website was serving malicious content. And I guess I have a few questions regarding that. One is, what makes a website vulnerable to cross-site scripting? How exactly does the cross-site scripting work? And then what kind of information is at risk on the client-side browser?
This is one where there are so many different variables involved. It's not a very common vulnerability, cross-site scripting. It's something that is created due to bad programming. So it's all in the development of whatever application you're using inside of a browser. And it is primarily browser-based in the way that it operates. It is one where you're going to find these. Equifax ran into this, and a lot of applications run into this. And it's very, very hard to identify where that might happen. Let me give you a practical example of cross-site scripting in use, because I've just finished, not just, but I've had all of my Security Plus content was all updated for the 501, which gave me a chance to go back through the content for Security Plus and start finding and put a little more detail in than what I had in my 401 videos. So this will allow us to do a little bit of this. There is a really nice example of this, though, that I put in here. Here, one good one was with a researcher that did this, that effectively hacked into your car using cross-site scripting. So what he did, he was able to talk to Subaru's application over the network and embed some JavaScript into that page that sent him your email address and password, effectively. Really sent them your authentication token. And when that got sent to you, or got sent to him, he was able to now access your car and do things with your car. A very good example is one that happened to Facebook many, many years ago. Somebody was able to put scripts as part of a message on Facebook. And if you read the message on Facebook, the script ran in your browser. This is really how cross-site scripting works the most common way. It's called a persistent attack. You read that message, and instead of reading it as a script, it executes as a script. And the script in JavaScript can do many different things. It can email tokens. It can email cookies. It can send information to another website. You can control a lot of different things at that point. That's one of the most common ways to get through and have cross-site scripting occur. And the limits and what it can do is based on the browser that you happen to be using and whether it recognizes a cross-site script is occurring, and the application you're using and whether it will allow that script to be put into the app in the first place. So you can see it's like this, there's like a bunch of different variables that have to happen to have that cross-site script work. And that's one of the reasons you don't see it as something that's incredibly common in the industry. But boy, when you find one, it can be really bad because effectively somebody can run their own scripts on your computer as you. And of course, you have access to so many different files on your computer. You have access to many different websites. If you're logged in and authenticated to a bank website, now it can take advantage of that and do things on that bank website as you. So now you can start to see why with Equifax, that could be a pretty big problem. If somebody's able to embed a script on the Equifax website, well, now anybody who goes to Equifax website is effectively running that script. And that's the big problem that Equifax ran into, is now they were able to take advantage of somebody signing up for fraud alert and effectively stealing their information. Not a good situation to be in. And it's very hard to identify, but once it's identified, you better patch it very quickly because the bad guys can take advantage of it.
So it's really up to the owners of the website to validate whether they're having this kind of issue then.
It's kind of a divided thing. The primary focus, I think, is exactly that. I think the owner of the website has to make sure that nobody can store or put some type of script onto their site that other people can run from their browser. The other piece of it is the browser needs to be smart enough to know that if something is coming from that site that is malicious, it should not be running that software. That's a little bit harder to do, though, which is why the onus is usually on that website provider to make sure that they keep things clean on their side. And in the case of Equifax, the vulnerability had been around for months. They just hadn't patched. So that's another problem that you will run into is these big companies have this enormous process and procedure. And if somebody misses one thing on one server with one vulnerability, that's all the bad guys need.
Well, that's great information, Professor Messer. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Ed. That's one we're going to run into many more times. That story with Equifax, I don't think it's over yet. It keeps getting weirder and weirder and more unusual when we step through these and having them there. So somebody on the website said, I'm almost finished studying for the SY0401 and want to take the exam. Should I now change the 501? No. Don't do that. Do not do that. If you've studied for the 401, if you've gone through all the 401 content, take the 401 exam. The 501 exam is half of the content's brand new. I mean, 50% of it's brand new. So if you study the 401, and you're going to have to restudy for a completely different exam, or at least a 50% different exam. You don't want to do that. And the reason I mentioned this, and I think I understand that people want to take the newest exam. I get it. I'm with you. I'd like to take the newest one as well. But there's a practical side of this as well. First, there's not a lot of 501 content out there relative to all the 401 that's out there. And secondly, and the piece that I don't think registers with people, if you take the 401 exam and you pass it, you earn a Security Plus certification. If you take the 501 and pass it, you earn a Security Plus certification. You earn exactly the same certification. There is no difference in the certification. One is not called the 401 certification, and one is not called the 501 certification. It's literally the same piece of paper. It's the same certification. So if you've already studied all the 401 content, you got it down, you're solid with it, you're ready to go take the exam, go take it and get your Security Plus already. That you already know it. You already know everything you need to know to earn your Security Plus. There's maybe an employer somewhere in the world who might tell you, I only want people that have passed the 501 certification exam. I have not found one yet, by the way, who does that. Plus, they'd have to talk funny. I've not really found anybody who requires that you take the latest because you still have to keep that certification up to date to have this there. So take your 401. Don't worry about it. Is there a site you can see the differences between the 401 and 501? I really should document this, but because I have all that content, I know exactly what the differences are. You can grab the 401 exam objectives and grab the 501 exam objectives, putting right next to each other and see what's different. That's what you really want to work on. There's a lot there. And the 401 exam's not going away until July. So that should give you an idea of just how long this ramp is. Never wait to get certified. Much longer will my 401 videos be up on YouTube? I never take my videos down from YouTube. You can go back and look at my 600 series A+. You can go back and look at my 300 series Security Plus right now. They'll always be there. I will not have links to them from my website, but you can, of course, go to YouTube. There's probably still the playlist is absolutely still there. So you can easily go through the older videos if you want to. They're not as good as the videos. I've gotten better I'd like to think that I've gotten better through the years. Back to the phones. I'm sorry to keep you holding. 801 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? It's not a long delay these days.
Hello, my name is David.
Hey, David, you want to listen into the phone and not your stream? What can we do for you, sir? This is what I mean.
Oh, should I change that?
You probably should. Just mute your screen there and listen into your Skype or your phone or whatever you're calling into. What question do you have today?
Okay, I actually have more than one. They're short. The first one is I have listened to people that are not experts in the area, and then they prepare for the Security Plus exam, and then they fail. So if I don't have a lot of experience in networking, as you were detailing recently, or dealing with firewalls, what are specific advice for us? Because there's more than one person that is a specialist in the area and is preparing for the exam. And another thing, where to find practice tests that we can feel that we have practiced a lot before taking the actual exam. And one last, how specific does the exam go with subnetting, as you were mentioning, and do subnetting?
Okay.
Sorry, those three.
Those are three good questions. The first question, let me say that most people taking the Security Plus exam are not in any way experts in the security field. Probably not even involved with IT security. And that's one of the reasons they're taking the Security Plus exam, in the hopes that they can get a position that does have an aspect of IT security associated with it. I don't think you need to be an expert in security to pass the Security Plus exam. There is a lot of process and procedure in the exam. There is a lot of practical knowledge you need to know. Asymmetric encryption, understanding when to use hashes, understanding how a router operates at a very high level. What's the difference between a router, a switch, and a load balancer? You know, that's even kind of a networking question, but it's definitely one that's on the Security Plus exam. But it helps if you have some practical experience. And I tell people, get a good book, watch a good video series, get some good Q&A, which goes to the question you just asked. And lastly, get as much hands-on as you can. A good chunk of the exam has nothing to do with hands-on. It's about process and procedure. So I'm really talking about the part of the exam where you're using a hash, where you're trying to understand how a particular vulnerability works, a particular attack takes place, trying to understand how PGP works, how asymmetric encryption really operates. Those are things that if you do it becomes a lot more ingrained into your DNA. You understand it a lot better after performing that function. And that's why I always mention the live labs. Whether you do it yourself in your own lab or you use a third-party lab, get as much hands-on as you can. I think that is the deciding factor for many people. Now, you also asked about Q&A. Where can I get some good questions and answers associated with this? And that's there's a lot of different places. The questions that are online, they don't tend to be the highest quality. Some are pretty good, but others are way off the mark. You want to find questions that are written for the exam version that you're planning to take, and they need to be questions that are at least a couple steps that make you think about, that are not simply asking, what does the abbreviation MD5 mean? That's not part of the exam. How you would use MD5 is a question you would run into, and one, as we did today in the study group, one you found that was there. So try to focus on those pieces and getting through them. And your last question, which now I've completely forgotten. What was the third question, David?
Okay, about the practice set and how specific that we go in subnetting.
Oh, subnetting, correct, sir.
Did they ask about do this subnetting, this range, or something like that?
Of course, you're correct, sir. It's your question. There's very, very in fact, subnetting itself is not mentioned in the Security Plus exam objectives. It is mentioned in Network Plus. It's not really mentioned very much in the A Plus, and there's no mention in the 401 about it. And as I recall, in the 501, there's no mention subnetting either. There probably are examples on the exam where they talk about IP subnets, but they're assuming that you've already done that with Network Plus. So I'm sure they could ask you a question on there about separating a network using VLANs. How would you do it if you had a network set up with this particular IP address range? I could see that as being a valid security question, but that's probably the extent of subnetting that you would ever get on the Security Plus. The fact that it's not mentioned in the exam objectives at all, and the fact that the exam is so broad on the security side and not so enormous on the networking side, lends me to believe there probably is not an enormous focus on it.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Thank you for the videos on YouTube. Thank you for all the help you give us. I'm studying for the exam. I'll let you know how I did when I take it.
Best of luck, David. Thanks for calling. That's one that thankfully we get all of our subnetting out of our system with the Network Plus, right? And get that there. So people in the chat room are talking about ROCA. I'll go back to the phones in just a moment. Hang on there. I see you there. People are talking about ROCA in the chat room. This is a researcher that has found in one particular library of key generation that they are able to derive the private key if all they have is the public key. Now, that's not supposed to happen. That is significant. That should never happen. Now, the problem with this is that the key library that is used here is primarily implemented in one particular set of cryptography silicon. So a particular chipset that's used to create these public-private key pairs is the one that is vulnerable. So if you, for instance, have PGP keys, like I do, I have PGP keys. I created these keys. I probably did it in a Windows operating system. I might have used a Mac. It's probably a Windows operating system. I created it in software. Those keys are fine. But if there's a key that, for instance, in practically every implementation of TPM, which is the chipset that's on the motherboard of your computer, this TPM that's there, the older versions, 1.2 of TPM, those are vulnerable. So here's a good example. If you have one of these systems and your TPM is version 1.2, and you had your operating system in Windows create a BitLocker key, which uses TPM to create that key. Now you've got BitLocker, which has a public and private key pair. If somebody gets a hold of your public key that's used for that, they will be able to derive your private key and have access to everything that's on your encrypted hard drive. That's just one example. There's also, the researchers went into GitHub. They found tens of thousands of keys that are vulnerable to this attack, where they are able to derive the private key if all you have is the public key. How scary is that? So that's why I said ROCA seems like it's a much more potentially dangerous vulnerability than the WPA2 stuff that came out this week. ROCA, you're going to have to, if your keys are vulnerable, you need new keys. There's just no way around it. And it is a subset of the total number of keys out there. So it's not as widespread as WPA2. WPA2, the vulnerability there, obviously the crack vulnerability affects everybody running WPA2. But you can see Windows has already sent out their update before the announcement was even made. All the Windows stuff was patched if you've applied the patch. iOS wasn't very vulnerable. There's one thing that needs to be patched there. That's sort of a corner case. Mac OS does need to be patched. Unix devices need to be patched. Linux and Android's just horrible in its implementation of these keys. It definitely needs to be patched. But those are rolling out pretty quickly. ROCA, you're going to have to build some new keys. That's not, sometimes that can be a little bit more of a pain. But those were the big ones this week. Talk about security vulnerabilities. Those were bad ones that showed up. And you need to be aware of all of those if you're planning to do anything with security. Back to the phone calls. 734 area code. You've been holding forever. Thank you so much. What's your name?
Hey, Professor Messer. My name is Paul.
Hey, Paul.
I was previously studying and doing programming and stuff like that. I found I didn't really like that. So I traveled and I actually found Security Plus and found your videos, and now I'm studying for the certifications. And I got to say, I love your videos. I put them, I just watch them, and then I can doodle and then listen to your videos. And when I see something interesting, I make a flashcard about it.
Awesome.
And I use those flashcards like everywhere I go.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah, thanks for putting the content out there. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I just pretty much just wanted to say that. The only real question I have is I've been studying for the exam, and the only part I get confusing is these wireless encryption protocols. I get the WEP, pre-shared keys, TKIP, PEAP, WPA2, as well as enterprise. All of that kind of gets pretty confusing, and I get jumbled up every time I go to these flashcards. I'm either missing one or I'm confusing the two. I was just wondering if you or anyone you knew really had like a tip to kind of organize these other than like a chart and match, because that part doesn't seem to get through in my head. I keep stumbling over myself on those, and it's the only real problem I have right now. So I was wondering, what you have for that.
Well, having just gone through and created the new 501 course, and a number of those technologies are still in there. Interestingly enough, WEP is not part of the 501 exam objectives. So I think CompTIA, and we've all sort of realized there's no more wireless devices in the world that still have that as an option. Everything else is now so old. We've all gotten rid of all the old stuff that we don't even talk about WEP anymore. So the only encryption methodology that's talked about on the 501 is WPA. And really, WEP is really only one thing we talk about in the 401. Everything else is WPA on the 401 anyway. But you're right, because the authentication methods are different than the encryption technologies. And in fact, so what I tried to do in my newer videos, which aren't out yet, I apologize, is try to break those out a little more specifically and talk about how AES is used in this scenario, but you've got TKIP and CCMP that you separate between these other two. And then you've got the PEEP and the EAP. How are those used for authentication? And I try to blend them all and separate them out and explain how they interact with each other in the newer videos. Because I just don't think, I think you're right. There needed to be more clarification in the 401 videos about it. The exam objectives didn't go through them a lot though. So I kind of took that one on as that just needed to be clearer and how it's used. So in my new, I have a completely new video in the 501 series that's just on wireless authentication. How are these methods used? And I give some examples of how it's used in WPA versus WPA2, just so you can break it out and see the differences between those. It's almost hard to do without having a flow chart of the differences between WEP and WPA and WPA2, because they all take these different flows to get finally to some encrypted data. What I tried to do was not put it in a picture form, which is way confusing if you look at them, but try putting it into practical terms. Why are we using this with WPA, and then why are we using this other thing with WPA2? And tried to break it out that way. I do have some course notes on the 501 that will be coming out soon. Maybe that's something worth writing a blog entry on and posting it to the website. But you're right, it is a scenario. Just try to take each specific wireless encryption protocol, write down the technologies associated with those, because they do have columns that way that are very specific to each other. What we did for WPA2 was very different than what we did for WPA, and certainly very different than what we did for WEP. They all sort of stand alone in that world. And of course, these days, most everything we're doing is WPA2 anyway, and being able to work through those.
Yeah, and I got to say, yeah, I know WEP isn't used. It's just like I did that. I wrote a chart down and I like matched them. I knew RC4 with TKIP was WPA. And then like when I got asked about PEAP, I was like, oh, I couldn't remember if it was RSA or RC4. And I'm glad you modify that in some of your newer videos. And hey, if you don't mind, do you mind me sending you an email checking out those videos so you can get some feedback from someone who's had this problem specifically?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody can always do that. Hit the contact us link at the top or the bottom of the website. That goes directly to me. It shows up on my phone. So anything you want to put in there, it says contact us. It's really contact me. I'll go through and read, and I try to reply back to all of them. And certainly if you got more details, send it on. Be glad to look at it.
Sure, yeah, and pretty much that's the only problem I've had. I got to say thanks for your videos. I bought your $10 study guide for this, the Security Plus course notes, and I printed them out, and I take those with those flashcards to like the DMV where I get a lot of studying done.
Yeah, that's a good place to sit down and read
when you make it. Oh yeah, it's great. But yeah, I just want to say thanks, and I appreciate that.
That's great. Thanks for calling, Paul.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
You too. That's good feedback too. And I feel ya, because when I was looking at updating the wireless cryptographic protocols, I broke them out so that you could understand that RC4 with TKIP was a type of encryption used, and that AES working with CCMP, AES replaced the RC4, CCMP replaced the TKIP. I tried to spell it out in a lot better terms in the new videos. Back to South Florida, the 561 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, Professor Mercer. My name is Yasmani.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
It's about A+ certification. I already took the 901 exam and I passed, but I can afford right now the 902, so I need to prepare for that. My question is, how much time can pass between these two exams? I mean, between take the first one and the second one?
A lot of people, for some reason, somewhere online, it must be written that you only get a year between these exams, because people will bring this up on my website all the time that, I got to hurry because I'm coming up on a year between taking these exams. And I ask, why are you hurrying? Because there is no limit. The only limitation between taking whatever exam you take first and whatever exam you take second, because you can take them in any order. You could have taken the 902 first, and now you have to take the 901. You took the 901 and passed it. Now you have to take the 902. They are a pair. You have to take both of them before they are retired. So the retirement for A+, the 901 series, has not been announced. I suspect that a new version of the A+ exam may be introduced at the end of 2018, maybe the beginning of 2019. And that means they usually give about 6 months before they retire one. So conservatively speaking, May, June, July of 2019 would be the latest that you could take the 902 exam. So you got until when it's finally retired, on the last day of retirement, before it's retired, is the time limit that you have available. That's the piece that is the important part. Other than that, you could take the first exam when it's first introduced and not take the other one until 3.5 years later if you wanted to.
Okay, perfect. I don't think that I need to wait so much, but I'm currently paying for the course notes and studying, but I think I should take the second exam in 1 or 2 months.
That's usually a good idea, because there's a little bit of overlap between the 901 and the 902. There's not a lot. There's a little bit. And I think when you get in that mode of remembering the boot process, that helps you when you're troubleshooting Windows starting up, for example. So there's a little bit that might help. They are two very different exams. So that's the piece that I think you have to think about concentrating on. And I think if you're already in the mode of doing the exam testing, you're studying and taking the test, it helps if you roll right into the second one. It doesn't help if you wait a year. I think you forget so many different things. So I think you've got the right idea.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I'm glad to read your course. Sorry
Thank you,
about my
sir.
English.
Best of luck to you, and let us know how it goes.
Thank you.
That's when it happens all the time. People say, well, I've got 12 months between. Somebody in the chat room said, oh, you have to do 12 months on the Linux Plus, but that's not written anywhere either. So I don't know where these come from, but they show up somehow with a time limit to have those pieces that are there. To the chat room, let's do some questions from there. Yeah, I noticed that Mint, the Linux, has already sent updates out for WPA2. I don't use wireless on my Linux. If you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, you're running on a Linux machine, but it's not doing any wireless, so I don't have to rush to get any clients updated. For the WPA2 problem, keep in mind that the problem is on the client. The problem is not on the access point. So we don't have to wait for Netgear to introduce an updated access point for this. The only time you will have a problem with access points is if they're an access point talking to each other, where they're effectively turned into clients. We might be using access points to bridge two access points together. A lot of devices have a bridge mode like that. That's something that would be susceptible to this problem, and there would need to be an updated set of firmware for that. But for most of us that just use a wireless access point as our router to the internet, we only have one of them in the house. It's not susceptible to the problem. The problem is on your mobile device, your tablet, your computer, your laptop. That's where the problem is. So make sure that you update those with the patch. I don't think the Mac OS patch is out. The Windows patch certainly is. We're seeing it come out for Linux and Android. Linux and Android were especially hit with this problem because not only are they susceptible to someone adding a new key, they can make the key all zeros. It accepts an all zero key. So they can effectively not only listen in to Linux and Android over the wireless, but they can inject their own content into the stream. So that's a bad one. That's a pretty bad problem. And that's why I think you're seeing them update so quickly. A lot of folks already knew this was coming. They always work in back channels on these problems and only tell you about the issue when the patches are ready. I think this one moved a little bit faster than what anybody was happy with. And it affected so many people. I think that's why it got the press. Maybe somebody can find out more info on the Linux Plus things. I don't see any examples of Linux Plus having a time limit associated with those. How did I learn servers? You're studying MCSA for Windows 2012. That's a good one. Whole New World is a whole new world. My server knowledge was more hands-on. I started working right out of college at a computer store in South Miami. And a lot of what I was doing was setting up equipment. Generally, it was workstations. It was older desktop computers, setting up the monitor, plugging everything in. Here's your computer. Sometimes people would need a hard drive replaced, warranty replacement. I would be the field guy. Go out, the new hard drive, put the new drive in, on my way. At that point, people were upgrading to hard drives. They would buy a computer that did not have a hard drive, and then the new hard drives came out. Whoa, what is this new technology? Let's install one. So they would buy one, and I would install the new hard drive for them, and they would have a new hard drive. I would partition the drive. I would install the disk operating system and boot from the hard drive. Sometimes people do memory upgrades. That time it was an entire card you would swap or add to a computer to add more memory. And then the PS2 line came out from IBM, which was much more modular with SIMs, and you had drives you could swap out instantly, so fast. Those were very easy. From there, I moved to an insurance company where we had a lot of servers. At that time, it was primarily Novell was the company that really did network-based servers. And at that time, it was more, we were starting to integrate more of the NT world. So you were seeing Windows NT, you were seeing OS2 being used as servers. And that's where I really got a lot of experience working with networking, understanding the protocols going over the networking, understanding how the operating systems were able to communicate back and forth, what the protocols they used, the SMB protocols for Windows, for example, and just understanding it from the ground up. I was very fortunate because nobody knew anything about this stuff. There was no MCSE. There was no deep-seated knowledge. There was no Active Directory at that time. There wasn't beginnings of that with LAN Manager. But there was no lot of detail. There weren't a large implementation of Windows. Windows took over very quickly when Windows NT came out, and that's where it really, really happened. That's the piece that that was the important part, was learning hands-on. So the more hands-on you're going to get with Windows, the better off you're going to be. Set up your own server. You can do this in a virtual environment these days. Set up a virtual machine on your computer. Turn it on, install Windows Server 2012, set up your own Active Directory domain with your own DNS server, use your own computer to talk to the domain, or build a new virtual machine that talks to the domain. That's a great way to do it. There's some pre-built client Windows devices out on modern.ie you can even download that you can add to the domain. So those are things very easy to do. And just do it yourself. Trust me, by the time you've installed Windows Server and you've now figured out how you screwed up the DNS configuration, as soon as you get through that, it's all downhill from there. It becomes much easier. But the more you break, the more you learn. So if it doesn't work when you do it the first time, that's great. Figure out why it doesn't work. A lot of times when we're in a production environment, when something doesn't work, they say, okay, just delete everything on the machine, reinstall. But you've missed an opportunity to figure out what was going on there. Why didn't it work? Could we have done something? You might not have been able to. It may have been so complex and so messed up, there was no way getting out of that. But it becomes a little bit better from a knowledge perspective if you can get onto that device and really watch what it's doing and break things down that way. And PowerShell and the commandlets are a lot to remember. But the more you use them, the more you remember. I mean, you know your social security number. You know how to drive a car. You know how to ride a bike. You know the process for unlocking your house and locking it back up again. You had to do them once, some point. Now you don't even think about it. Now you end up at your destination. You're not even sure how you got there. What were you thinking about? The music was on. I was thinking about a thing, and here I am. It's been an hour. I don't remember the trip. It just becomes automatic. So it should become automatic in Windows for you as well. It should become muscle memory. Back to the phones real quick, to the 443 area code. Are you there, a caller? You're at the SSL area code, aren't you?
Yes, hi. Good evening, Professor Messer. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? What's your name?
Yes, very good. My name is Sahir.
Welcome, Sahir. What can we do for you?
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to thank you for the brilliant work you're doing, like the Professor Messer videos and all the content you have. And my actual question from you is this, do you have any recommendations, like what Microsoft certifications we should get?
First, you're quite welcome. And secondly, that is a wide open question. So at one point, I downloaded a list of all of the Microsoft certification exams that are available to take. And it was a list of over 200 exams, as I recall. It was just an enormous number. It might even been more than that, but it was an enormous number of exams. Obviously, they work all the time at trying to figure out the best set of groupings of those exams to come up with their own set of certifications. So the question I have for you, I usually take this question, I kind of turn it around the other direction. And so my question in the other direction is, what are you trying to do? Is there a particular direction that you're looking to go, or is there a particular place you're trying to work that is going to need these Microsoft certifications?
I'm actually trying to go into like security, ID security stuff, and also I'm trying to get like CompTIA Security Plus on the side, because a lot of job requires, like particularly in my area, because I live in like Maryland area.
Sure.
So they are like, and DC, Virginia area, there's a lot of like certification requirement for Security Plus and
Yep.
MCSE certifications
Yep.
and different vendor certifications. So I would just get your recommendation on what certifications are probably these days are good to have in any category, but it is relating more to like a security side of the IT.
Yeah, you run in your particular world is very specific to certifications because you are dealing with what is called the Department of Defense 8570 baseline, which is if you're working for the federal government of the United States, there are a particular set of certifications that are required at a bare minimum. And they're done like anything with the government. It's not just a list. It's a large list with multiple categories and multiple levels and extensive breakdowns of these. And it ranges from everything from A+ at IAT level 1 up to the CISSP at the IAT level 3. Or if you're going into IAM, or if you're going to IASAE, or if you're going to CSSP, all of these abbreviations on top of all the other abbreviations that you have to know already. And people are asking about this. Just search for DoD 8570 and you will find a baseline of these things. But Security Plus is in a lot of these. So that's why a lot of people, when they're getting into these types of roles, will use Security Plus as that entry-level certification to earn the qualification that you need to be able just to apply to some of these jobs. And that is a good one to have. Now, also on this list are a number of Microsoft certifications. There are Cisco certifications on here. There's ISC squared certifications. There's tons that are listed on here from many different organizations. I think Security Plus and a lot of the ones at level 1 that are on this list are entry-level certs. So people are looking just to get into the security world. You're looking at getting an A+, a CCNA Security, a Network Plus, a Security Plus, those types of certifications. When you get into anything dealing with the government, you're probably going to be dealing with server operating systems for Microsoft as well. And it's just a popular, whether you're going into the government world, or whether you're going into a commercial position, Microsoft Windows Server is at this point ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It is extensive in its implementation. You would rarely go into a company that says, well, we just don't run any Microsoft Server here. I might have run into one of those in my life at this point. But even that one, I think, had a few. But that's one of the good examples of if you're going to focus on something, at least starting out, focus on the big, broad things that everybody uses. Focus on a Microsoft Server or Microsoft Workstation if you want to get into workstations. Focus on the Security Plus, if only to get that DoD qualification. Focus on the things that you know you want to move into, but try to make it as broad as possible. When you get into a role, then you can start narrowing down. Getting that first security job, for instance, you may be working on firewall administration, IPS administration. You may be doing handling the SIM. You may be working on VPNs. But all of those are 4 different things with 4 different very, very important and very different knowledge sets associated with them. So don't worry so much about the specifics at that point. Get your broad categories down, and you'll have plenty of time to start narrowing your focus and being more specific once you get into those roles.
Okay, and my second question was this. I was also seeing on the CompTIA website, like they have a Project Plus certification. Is that a good one certification to have on the side? Because I heard like project management is quite a good certification to have. So I think the Project Plus also covers like a little bit of spectrum of that.
It does. In fact, I've seen a number of schools insist that not only do you get your technical certifications like A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, but they also require you get some of these, what I call non-technical, like Project Plus, because project management, there's a science to project management. There are very high-level project management certifications you get if that's the role you want to go into for what you're doing. There's other certifications on things like IDLE, which is the IT infrastructure library. That is a very broad business process management type of certification. Those are
Yes,
pretty important to get. I
I
think that,
guess that's one.
you know what I think? I think they have limited use in your first role in IT, but the people hiring you put those at a different level, and not better or worse, but they stack alongside your A plus, your network plus, security plus, because I think it makes you broader in your knowledge set. That, oh, you know how to work with a project manager because you have a project plus certification. Oh, you understand how to work with our business process, our change management, understanding how to separate from our development versus our production environments because you understand IDLE. So there is help. Sometimes I'll dismiss those certifications out of hand for somebody entry level, but it may be the difference when you're sitting in the room at an interview and they see, well, not only do you know technical things, you understand how to make everything work together, and sometimes that's just as valuable.
Okay. And are you gonna also start any study groups on other CompTIA certifications like Linux Plus or CSP or CSA Plus?
I've threatened to do that. It's more about time and resources at this point. I have these 3 study groups I do a month for A plus, Network plus, Security plus. I have one every week, which is a good amount for me to stay sane. And then I usually have a week off at the end of the month that I can use to continue to create content. Most of where I focus is creating content to make video courses to put on YouTube. So that's where most of my time is spent. For the last 4 months, that's all I've been doing with Security Plus, is making that course and getting it ready to shoot. So right now, there aren't any plans to add more live events like this. I would love to do more live events, but it's really more of a physics problem. Where am I going to find the time? Where am I going to be able to put together the content? That's the part that really is the challenge for me. I'd love to do it. It's just about finding the amount of time to be able to make that happen.
Okay, and just a last question from you, because I think the Security Plus exams 501 version is out there. So I think the 401 is also probably available till next year.
Right.
So is it better to probably take the 501 exam or to stick with the 401 exam for this amount of period?
There is no better. There is only which one you have content available to study from. There's not a lot of 501 books out yet relative to the 401. There's not a lot of 501 video courses available yet, if any, compared to the 401. There might be one out there right now compared to the 401. You're going to find a lot more 401 materials to study from than 501 materials at this point. So it's up to you. If you think you have everything you need to pass the 501, study for that one. If you think that you'd be better off using the content you have available for the 401, study for that one, because it doesn't matter which one you pass. You get exactly the same certification at the end of it.
Okay. No problem. Okay, sir. Thanks very much for your time, and I'll be looking forward to more of your 501 content and the rest of the A plus, Net plus content. And I'm very happy the way you present your material, and wish you best of luck.
I appreciate that. Thank you,
for your time, sir.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
There is plenty to available for the 401. Not a lot in comparison, but there may be enough for you. So if you look around and you're like, well, there's a 501 book. That's all I need. Go for it. But the problem is that there's 12 401 books out there to choose from. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it because I don't have 501 videos out, although I don't have 501 videos out. So I'm sort of contributing to the problem. I get it. I'm working on that. The 619 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, Daniel here. This might be a dumb question, but I just went into your YouTube channel. I noticed that you have 2 certification course playlists for the Security Plus exam. One has 84 videos, the other one has 73.
Yep.
What's the difference?
There isn't a difference. The problem is that YouTube has a hard limit to the number of videos that can go into a playlist. So I think I have 250 total videos for Security Plus. I think their limit is 200. So I got to 200 and I couldn't fit any more on a playlist. So I had to split it into 2 playlists. But to split it at number 200 didn't make logical sense with the numbering of the CompTIA exam objectives. So I think I have like domains 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the first playlist and domains 5 and 6 in the second, something like that. But they go together. You have to watch all of them for that to have happen. It was just one of the limitations on YouTube. What I hope is that the 501 series is going to be formatted a little bit differently. The 401 I cut up into some very, very small sections, so small that some of the videos are like 2.5 minutes long, which is a little too short. What I'm doing in this one is they will be a little bit longer. The materials will be synced together a lot more. They will play off each other. And so although the videos will be a little bit longer, there'll be fewer videos, and I should be able to fit them on a single playlist. But it's kind of inside baseball, but that's the concepts and the ideas that go through my head.
Gotcha. Okay, so we should start off with the larger playlist, the one that has 184, if we were to go in order, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I labeled them 1 of 2, and the other one is 2 of 2, but it's so long in the title, you probably lose it off the side of the playlist.
Gotcha. All right. Cool, man. Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. I should probably rename them so that 1 is 1 of 2, and then the name, and then 2 of 2, and then the name. Because if you missed the last playlist, you've missed almost half the course. Don't do that. Don't go like that. That would be bad. In the chat room, people are asking about the CE plus. So on this list, you'll notice that some of these are like the A plus CE, the Network plus CE. They're asking, what is CE? Nobody ever says CE. The CE stands for continuing education. After 2011, or let's say before 2011, or 2012, I think it was, when you passed your Network Plus exam, it was good for life. There was no expiration associated with it. But after the beginning of 2012 and on, when you passed an A plus Network Plus Security Plus certification, it had a 3-year expiration associated with it. So to delineate between those two, CompTIA calls the old certifications Network Plus, that's good for life, and then Network Plus CE, that's the one that has the 3-year time limit associated with it. You have to renew it within 3 years or that goes away. So it has a shelf life. So that's how, if you see it, what the government is saying is that we won't take A plus good for life. We won't take Network plus good for life. You need the A plus CE or the Network plus CE. Now, the reality is it's really easy to renew these things. So as soon as you have it, that's probably a pretty good one to use. So that's what that is about. So I don't know why they don't document that a little better, but that's where it is. Back to the phones. 318 area code. Thank you for calling. What's your name?
Yes, hello. This is Joel. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Basically, I was calling because I'm currently in school for the networking side, the network administration side, but my heart is actually with the software development. I actually studied the development side on my own. But my question is to you, if I basically want to learn both sides, like the only problem I'm having is security, what would be my best way of study tactics?
It's a tough one. It's really difficult to blend those two together, by the way. And it's not difficult for a person to blend those together. If you wanted to study application development as it was associated with workstations, networking, and security, and then at the same time understand the aspects of IT network administration and IT security, you could do that. The problem is that the industry is not structured in that way. The industry is very well delineated into two major pieces. One side is the computer science side, and computer science generally focuses on application development, hardware creation. You're building your own chipsets. It's the building part on the computer science side. And then the other side is the information technology side, the IT side, which is more of how you would implement those technologies, how you would set up servers so you can serve those applications, how you would build the networks so that people could use those applications. And there's a little bridge we build in the industry between those two because the developers kind of throw the applications over to the IT folks, and the IT folks have to implement them using the methodologies that the developers set up. And in almost everywhere you go, the industry has separated those out into really two distinct groups. The IT groups rarely do any development. The development teams rarely do any implementations. So you kind of have to make a decision from a career perspective, which part interests you the most, and you kind of go down that direction. Now, that being said, what does it help if you're a developer, if you understand operating systems and networks and security? Of course it does. From an IT perspective, does it help you if you understand a programming language? Of course it does. But what you find is that in your day-to-day, the IT team doesn't do development and the development team doesn't do IT. There's a very, very nice delineated separation in the industry between those two things. You're seeing a little more overlap these days with software-based networking, SDN, but not a lot. And in fact, SDN is not the amazing implementation that most people make it out to be in the books. But you almost have to make a decision now, which direction do I want to go, and kind of head down that direction, because you'll find when it comes time for you to get a job, they're going to be looking for one side or the other.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Like, I'm currently in school for network administration, and it's my last semester. So I actually will be graduating, and they offer us to take the Network Plus, Security Plus, and the CompTIA A Plus. And I was wondering, will A Plus benefit me if I'm actually looking to going in on the software development side?
If you're planning to do software development, you'll find that A Plus, Network Plus, nor Security Plus will have much help to you on that side. Other than when you're developing applications for those technologies, you understand how they're working behind the scenes. When you're programming an application to use the network, you understand about the TCP call setup that you're sending off to a library and understanding the responses that you're getting back associated with it. And you're smart enough not to hard code an IP address inside of your code. So those are the types of things that might help you with. And they're good entry-level certifications that might help you in an interview. My advice to you is to find the jobs you're interested in going into and see what people are hiring. Go out to the major job posting sites in your area, see what the local employers are asking for the job types that you're interested in, and maybe look at both sides. Look at someone who's on a help desk, look at a job posting for a network administrator, look at a job posting for somebody doing Java or JavaScript development, and see if you can see the differences in what the base requirements are for those job postings. That should start to give you a pretty good idea of where the hiring managers are looking when they're ready to hire someone.
Okay.
So I've given you a little homework. You've now got things to do.
Yeah, do a little research. I surely appreciate the information, and like I've been watching your videos, and my instructor actually goes on to YouTube and pulls up some of your videos so we can watch. So I learned a lot from watching your videos. I surely appreciate your information that you share with us.
I like your instructor already.
All right.
Good luck, sir. Thanks for calling.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Whenever I start looking at where to go for my career, follow the path that you like the most. It's going to change. This whole IT thing, you never know where you're going to end up. When I got into technology, there was no internet. So I could not at that point say, my plan is that I'll have a live stream and I'll have people and we'll ask questions and we'll do an interactive Q&A. I couldn't even think about that. It didn't exist. It wasn't a thing. So just do what you like to do. You're doing it every day. You're going to work. You want to go to work. You want to enjoy what you're doing. Go find the thing you like to do. And then the other pieces just fit in on that and piece these together. Back to the phones. To the 760 area code. What's your name, caller?
Abdullah.
Oh, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
My question is, do you think the two playlists is enough to study the Security Plus?
I don't think that any single study source is enough for any certification. In fact, I would recommend for anybody planning to take an IT certification, get as many different resources as you can and get as many different kinds of resources as you can. Get a book, watch a video, a set of videos, get some Q&A, get some hands-on. And I think all of those teach you differently. Could you watch just my videos and take the class or take the test and pass? People have done that. And I build it so that typically you could do that, but I don't recommend it because I think there's so many other things you can use to study from that can also help you. You should walk into the exam with the best possible opportunity to pass that test. And unless you've read through a book and done some hands-on and watched videos and done some Q&A, you haven't quite done the service to yourself that you need to have the best possible chance to pass the exam. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And another question, how should I stop studying and say, okay, this is the time to schedule the exam?
It's kind of tough to know that because everybody's a little bit different. But what I usually recommend to people is that CompTIA has the best list of exam objectives that you will find across practically any other certification provider. They give you a very detailed checklist of everything you need to know. And I tell people, if you can go through that list and explain that technology to somebody who's sitting in front of you and check it off the list, then that's one less thing. And if you can go through that entire list, and this is pages and pages and pages of content, if you can get through all of those exam objectives, you're now ready to take the exam. Technically, you can probably get through 90% of them, 95%, and you'd be ready to take the exam. But ideally, you'd be able to check off everything on that. It really is the best barometer because some people will study better than others. Some people have more experience in certain areas than other people have. Some people can look at the list and cross off an entire section because they know that part cold already before they even open the book. Other people know nothing sitting down, and they really have to go through every single topic. That's your best checklist, I think. And that's the only way you're going to know is if you do it for yourself with that checklist.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
I appreciate your help.
Thanks for calling. That's it's one of the best resources out there. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives, or go to Google and look for, just type in CompTIA exam objectives. Everything is there. It's perfect to have it there. And especially if you're trying to figure out, am I ready to take the exam? That's how you know you're ready, right there. It's one of the best ways to know you're ready as well. Well, we've come to the end of another Security Plus study group. Here we are. We're even kind of over our last hour. We usually go an hour. We need a little bit more. That's okay. We've got a lot more to go through. We've got another one of these next month where we'll go through another set of questions. I had a little bit left over, and I've got to write some more. So I'm planning that one. Where's my list? I've got the list. You would think I'd have all of these things ready to go when we're talking about the end of the study group. So on November the 15th is our next one. Hopefully you were able to get to that one. Of course, all the replays of all of these study groups are available on my website. You're more than welcome to go there and watch all of them, the replays that are available for all of the study groups. Feel free to check the website from time to time. For the people that are wondering when the 501 videos are coming out, we're working on the course notes right now. As soon as the course notes are done, I start shooting videos. Just keep checking the website and checking, maybe subscribe to YouTube. You'll know immediately when I start posting those because they'll show up and you can be informed of that on YouTube. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube to stay up to date with those. I expect we'll start shooting them in a couple of weeks. So they'll be coming out. You'll start seeing them trickle out. I put them out as I finish. So I'm not going to build every video and then put them all out at once. I'll put them out a little bit at a time just as we get them done so that you can get them as quickly as possible. Thanks for joining us on the study group. I could not do it without you. Thank you for your support with the purchase of our courses and our course notes. We wouldn't be able to keep the lights on without you. So for that, we're extremely grateful. I want to thank you for joining us this time, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus study group.